How you been?
Oh, doing good, Blake. Appreciate you letting me come on the show with y'all. How I watch most y'all stuff, then I watch you and Joe's show. So big listener here. Appreciate you asking me to come on, man. Fired up.
No problem. Look, I'm really excited about this, Dave. We're going to start doing, obviously, and you are a part of it. You cover the SEC. You talk a lot of the SEC. We're going to be starting a lot of these clips and talking a lot more about the SEC on the platform. So I thought you would be really good to bring you in here and just let's talk around the SEC. Obviously, we'll start with football, which is what we mainly talk about. I got a question for you. You are a guy that I think just hearing some of your takes and some of your thoughts about what's going on around the SEC from a football perspective. Obviously, one of the biggest questions is around Alabama football. Now, I got to ask you the 16,000-foot view. Dave, are they in a little bit of trouble? Because, I mean – The reason I ask is they have players leaving, really good players leaving. You got Ryan Grubb leaving. You got a lot of exit, obviously, with Saban out the door. As a guy that has been around Alabama, has been around the SEC, specifically football, what is the 16,000-foot overview with the University of Alabama football?
As we stand right now, I mean, I'll be honest, going back to the head coaching job, when they hired Kalen DeBoer just over a month ago, I thought it's as good as they could have gotten at the time with what was offered at the buffet, I guess you would per se. What meal, what food was offered at the buffet. I felt like he's won everywhere. Now, can it translate down to the Southeast? Yeah, still to be determined. But I think from an offensive system, now we'll talk about that here in a minute. Like when you're developing their players, I feel like they're as good as anybody. Again, recruiting, player acquisition will be key. Now with Ryan Grubb leaving and Scott Huff, who I actually think will be a bigger loss overall than Ryan Grubb.
I agree.
As you know, dude, you played. That is such a developmental position. You have to have a relationship with your players. You got to be able to coach them hard. But again, as you know, you can't coach them hard if they don't know how much you care first. So it's a total relationship. You're bringing that in. Shoot, I forget their exact date when they start spring ball, but you got a little bit over a month. But still, I think that's the biggest issue. They're promoting Nick Sheridan.
Former quarterback at Michigan.
Quarterback at Michigan.
Yep.
Yeah, there are a lot of Indiana connections over there on that staff right now. Obviously on defense, Kane Womack over there. Offensively, I think if I'm Kalen DeBoer, I don't really – maybe initially you're involved with the offense just this year. You kind of let Nick kind of get comfortable and you hand it off to him completely. But I'm one of those people, I don't think you can be a head coach, offense or defense, and be a full-time play caller and be elite. I just don't think you can. There's too much CEO going on, especially at the SEC level. Like, as you know, you talk about it all the time, but like Brian Kelly, a CEO of a massive organization, like now Nick Saban was, how Kirby Smart is. Obviously, Kirby Smart's going to sit in on defensive meetings with Will Muschamp.
Right.
Muschamp was an analyst now, but with T-Rob or Glenn Shumate, obviously he's going to give his piece. I think that's fine. That's awesome. He needs to be doing that on offense too, and I think he is. But there's just too much going on with NIL, talking to your current roster, dealing with your coaches, dealing with some donors and stuff like that. I don't think you can really be a player. People think Lane Kiffin calls it, and I think he has a say, but Charlie Weiss Jr. has developed that trust with Lane now where he's a big play caller. Jimbo Fisher would really never give it up. Well, we saw that work. Sitting in that building in the mirror, he never left that offensive staff room to go talk to the defense, really how they feel about defensive prospects or get to know about that. Didn't really know the whole landscape. I feel like in today's time, you have to be able to be a CEO of you got to treat it like a Fortune 500 company. That's what these SEC programs are. You have to be the CEO of that. Maybe this year is a one-off year. Like I talked about at Mississippi State. I think Jeff Lebby needs to call plays this year for Mississippi State because I don't think they're going to be very good. But I think from that perspective, it's a little different that they need to have something to hang their hat on to be a little excited about in Starkville. So if he's putting up some points, but they're losing some games, they have something to be like, well, we won 4 or 5 games. But you know what? The offense was rolling. And I think that's Lebby's piece. Maybe for Kalen DeBoer this year, with Grubb leaving to go to the Seahawks, Nick Sheridan, first-time play calling. Technically, I know he's been in the SEC before at Tennessee, but as a GA, maybe you're a little bit more in that offensive staff room than you'd maybe like to be this year. But I think at some point here, whether that's in 25, 26, he's got to step away and run that CEO. And I think he's going to learn that. In the SEC, there's a lot more that comes with that job than just calling plays as the head coach.
What is the realistic expectation for Bama? So, like, David, it comes to a point where, like, if I say it as a guy who does cover college football but is an LSU guy, it comes off different when I say, listen, if this were anybody else in the country, like I saw a lot of people are putting Alabama in their way too early top 5. And I'm asking the question, Dave, how? You know, like because you've lost so much, what is the real true expectation that Alabama football should have? Is it 9 wins? Is it getting to a playoff? With everything that they do still have, and I know that Kalen DeBoer, I'm with you. I feel like he's going to be good enough in calling plays. Ryan Grubb is a guy that's been with him the whole way. But look, both of them know how to call plays, and I think Kalen DeBoer will be fine there. But what is the when we get into September and the ball is finally kicked off and we get into the season, what's the true expectation? What should it be for Alabama football going into year one under Kalen DeBoer?
Well, I think with it moving to a 12-team playoff, to answer your question, I think the goals should be to make the playoff. I think anything other than that would be icing on the cake, given who they've lost, the losses on the coaching staff, obviously now. If we were still in a 4-team playoff, I think that'd be an unrealistic expectation this year completely. But, I mean, you're looking at the schedule. It's difficult. I mean, the game he has to win, I think, is that at Wisconsin game. Can you imagine that if he loses that, Blake? If he loses at Wisconsin, they have a bye week, then they get Georgia at home. Woo, you got to win that. Then you get Georgia at home. I mean, they should get Vanderbilt, South Carolina. At Tennessee is going to be a tough game. Missouri at home. At LSU. Oklahoma is one of those teams. Vegas released their odds. What was it? Over under 6.5 total win total. I thought it'd be a little higher than that. I was surprised. But I think, always at that school, you're looking for double-digit wins in a playoff appearance. But I think if it's 9-3 this year, I think it is what it is. There was a lot of losses. I think that would be realistic. I know a lot of people that wear crimson are not going to be happy. I should say they're going to be pissed off if it's a 9-3 season this year. But I don't think that's too far off. I mean, Vegas set them at 9.5 over/under win total.
Right.
So that's where I think Vegas. Those buildings and stuff are there for a reason, so they're usually spot on with all that. I'd say 9-10 wins if you could finish in the top 3 or 4 of the SEC, make the playoffs. And from there, I would consider that a successful season. As crazy as that sounds, if you make the playoffs, I think that's a successful season this year.
I 1,000% agree with you. And look, I don't, when programs listen, the players leaving would bother me if I'm Alabama, but then again, Dave wouldn't. The biggest thing that bothers me is obviously Nick not being there. Let me ask you, as a guy is an Alabama guy, and you've been in player personnel in the SEC, were you surprised on how it ended with Nick? Meaning, like, I thought when Nick was finally going to hang it up, he would have announced it in the beginning of the year. There would have been more rumblings. Like, everybody was shocked that Nick Saban was retiring. Being who and the experience that you have in the SEC, were you surprised on how it ended with Nick retiring at Alabama?
Dude, you talk to people that worked over there, and it kind of went exactly how they drew it up. We know a familiar person who was over there. I've heard him even saying, this was probably about last year, talking to him. He said, dude, it's going to come one day when no one expects it. From hearing from him,
he always said that.
Yeah, he was on a 2-mile run, and they're like, we got a team meeting. He had to haul ass back to make it to that team meeting, and then found out there. But yeah, I don't think Nick Saban was going to go on some Mike Krzyzewski kind of send-off tour where he's getting a football before every pregame, wherever they're going, like the Derek Jeter, hey, it's the captain's last season. Everybody, let's wave him off goodbye. It's kind of crazy to think about it. I mean, he's been retired for over a month. That feels like a year ago at this point. Like, you don't even hear from him. You see him on the golf course with some rappers and stuff every now and then. You see him, he's going to be on College Game Day, and that'll be interesting. But yeah, it was just like, yeah, I'm done. And he attended Kalen DeBoer's press conference, made a brief statement, and that was that.
What's funny is I'm because I think if you're an LSU guy like myself, you look at Nick and say what he did here, and you're mad that he was there at Alabama for close to 2 decades. But Dave, I got to be real with you. I'm more excited to hear how Nick Saban views football than anything. Like, for example, week 1 or week 0 when College Game Day comes back. And look, I don't really watch it. I can't sit down and sit there and watch it the whole time because I think there's a lot of fluff in there. Week 0, I'm going to be watching what Saban says, because I do think that somebody with his prestige breaking down teams, like, he's not going to sugarcoat. Now, I think he's going to give Alabama some favor, and that's fine. I mean, why wouldn't he? But at the end of the day, I mean, you're talking about one of probably arguably the best mind to ever coach in college football going to be breaking down teams. I don't think I've ever been excited to hear somebody's takes on college football more than his. Am I crazy with that?
No, I think it made college game day almost appointment watch TV again. Like you just mentioned it. Like I didn't really, you put it on in the background, kind of in Saturday morning, and I'd flip back over sometimes because I like hearing Urban Meyer's take and stuff like that on the Fox show.
1,000%.
Yeah, so I would go back and forth, but no one really locked in. I'm with you. The thing I hope that I'm sure ESPN would love this, and I hope he is he's honest. Like if they're reviewing a game from the week before, he's kind of like, why were they in cover 3 there in third and short? I would love for him to really be honest like that. I'm with you though. I think inevitably there's going to be a little Alabama bias from his standpoint. I don't think he's going to come out there
100%.
But no, I just hope he's honest, and I think it'll be interesting to see like his patience for timing, because you've done it longer than I have. The patience on being on a TV and stuff like, Coach, you only got 3 minutes. You got to wrap this up. And he's not used to someone telling him he has X amount of time. It was kind of like, I'll take however long I need to get this out. That'll be interesting. But the main thing is, and I think me and you aren't the only ones here. I think everybody would be like, I want to see his brutal honesty up there.
Yeah, and they gotta let him go. If he wants a 5-minute segment, you let him talk. You don't interrupt what he's saying unless it's something that's so bad. But you got to let him go. Okay, let's break some of those teams down individually now that we just kind of had your overall thoughts on it. Dave, Texas is a team that's coming into the SEC, obviously coming off a playoff run here. I don't know if I buy – I got to put them in like a tier 1, tier 2 of the SEC because, look, they just made the playoffs. They're recruiting very well. They had a lot of retention, not a lot of – I mean, they do have some guys entering the draft, didn't have a lot of guys hit the portal. But, Dave, why am I a little skittish on saying that Texas comes in here and wins and has double-digit wins? Why do I need to see Texas come into the SEC and get there before I start saying, hey, man, they're one of the better teams in the SEC? Or what are your thoughts on Texas in year 1 coming into the conference?
Yeah, like you said, I think there's going to be a learning curve. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule here, just any back-to-back tough. I mean, I think the back-to-back weeks is what Texas and Oklahoma aren't going to be used to. And I think a lot of people that follow
like on the road.
Just kind of like I'm looking at it right now. I mean, Oklahoma and Georgia, I know they're both at home, but back-to-back games right there that you're really not used to getting in the Big 12. Like it'd be interesting to see who they were used to playing the week after they played Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl when they're in the Big 12. Maybe Kansas.
Yeah, I think it was Kansas this
Baylor.
year, which was a tough game. But I mean, look, you're going from playing Kansas to Georgia.
Correct.
Like that. I mean, that's not an easy stretch by any means.
No, and then you're finishing up down the stretch. I mean, there are a lot of teams that could be toss up. And again, I think they should be favored in all these games. This is kind of why I like them to go win. I'd be shocked if they didn't win 9+. But Florida, who knows what Florida will be doing at home at that point? They play them at home in the fourth to last game at Arkansas. Again, could they be tapped out with Sam Pittman at that point? Kentucky the week before the A&M game, I don't think they lose that game, Texas, but I think both Texas and Texas will have total look-ahead games right before that game for both teams being like their biggest game in a decade. But again, I mean, let's just say they lose at Michigan and they lose to Georgia. I mean, I would think they should beat Colorado State. UTSA a week after Michigan could be a trap. They should win that. ULM they should win. Mississippi State at home they should win. I think they should be Oklahoma. I know they lost Oklahoma this past year. I think they'll be better than Oklahoma. But again, how improved that Oklahoma defense to me is interesting. I think they got a lot of guys I like back. We talked Georgia. They should win at Vandy. I'm going to predict them to beat Florida at home right now. I think they'll win at Arkansas, Kentucky. I think they could have had a tougher league schedule to open up the year play. So it wouldn't shock me if they went 10-2 and their only loss was to Georgia. Maybe you throw one in there you're not really even thinking about. But again, I look at it, I don't know who if it's not Michigan. And Michigan, as you know, is breaking. I know they promoted Tron more internally, but still they lost some guys. Like it's kind of favorable in my opinion. They don't draw LSU. They don't draw Alabama. They don't have to go play at a place like Auburn that even if Auburn's a 7-8 win team, it's still a tough-ass place to play at Jordan-Hare.
No doubt. Ask Georgia how tough it is to play there.
Yeah, and Alabama. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I kind of look at him like in the road games. I mean, what were we talking? We were talking about not Michigan, at Vandy, at Arkansas, and at A&M.
Yeah, it's not. It's yeah.
Yeah, A&M's definitely the toughest, but Yeah, I see 10-2 probably. I see double digits just off the schedule as we speak on February 13th. 9 wouldn't shock me, but I don't see where that third loss comes, especially if they beat Michigan. I'm sitting there like, I don't see them losing both Georgia and Oklahoma. Maybe I'm wrong. It's definitely their toughest back-to-back games. But, yeah, I think the schedule is very favorable for their first year in the league.
Let's go to Ole Miss because you brought up an interesting point that I want to ask you about. You said you win with your top 40 guys. Here's the only issue that I would have with Ole Miss. They got the arguably defensively the best frontline talent not named Georgia in the conference. Dave, if they start having injuries, they're having to put in true freshmen. And I think that that's where you're starting. The depth will really come into play here. I think that Ole Miss is a playoff team. I think that they get to 10-2, okay, without question, and they get into the playoff. Is Ole Miss the new team that we have to start talking about? Like, hey, man, they're a team that, like, when they come to town, it's a big deal. What do you look forward into with Ole Miss?
I think it's like what you said, improving that defensive depth. I mean, I think Pete Golden did as well as he could have last year in his first year at Ole Miss. Still just missing that depth. And again, as you know, we talked about the offensive line being a developmental position earlier when we were talking about Scott Huff leaving Alabama. Defensive line, another developmental position. You can't just go live in the portal and create defensive line depth. You got to build it through the high school ranks and develop that with your coach. Because the Walter Nolans of the world, the big disruptor interior defensive line, aren't coming out of the portal often because they're usually getting paid to be retained at their current school. So that's where sometimes they lose. I mean, I know they've gotten like Jared Ivey and stuff out of there and JJ Pegues and stuff like that's moved over, but he changed positions. He's from the area, a little different. But again, we talked about Texas. I think this schedule is even almost easier than Texas. I talked about it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, they should be 6-0 heading to Baton Rouge. I mean, it'd be really disappointing if they weren't.
Yeah, and I agree. And look, the personnel that they brought in from the portal is ridiculous. I mean, Walter Nolan, Trey Amos, they got Prince from Florida, the defensive end who had double-digit sacks. Yeah. They're going to be a monster that I don't think people are really looking forward to. One other team I want to single out here, football, before we talk and transition a little basketball before we get you out of here. Auburn. They have some coaching shakeup, okay, but they bring in so much talent with Hugh. Auburn is a team that I feel like nobody really has talked about. We talk about them when they make some big splash in recruiting or coaching. You know, Hugh's going to be calling plays this year per him. What are your thoughts about Auburn? What's the realistic parts that what's a realistic expectation for them, you think? Going into 24.
It depends what day of the week with Hugh, right? If he's calling plays, if he's been recruiting a lot, he's probably not involved in the game plan. If they were bad that past week, he wasn't involved. If they're successful, he's involved in it that week.
Okay, so I thought I was crazy. Like he throws coaches underneath the bus more than anybody I've ever seen.
He's almost too honest in his press conference. It was like, what was it? It was going into the back-to-back stretches against – it was the LSU, Georgia, and whoever they had last year in the middle of that. He's like, I mean, we'll be lucky to win this game. I was just kind of like, dude, this guy's essentially – I mean, should they even show up on Saturday? This guy, if I'm an Auburn fan, was not reeking of real confidence. But to answer your question, I mean, from talking to some people over there, they're really high on Peyton Thorne. And I think you immediately, if that's who you're riding with at your quarterback position, unless Peyton has a Jason Campbell type turnaround, and we're talking different styles of football now from than it was in 2004. Right. But I think there's a total ceiling on your season the minute you roll with that kid. Blake, I'm going to ask you, do you see Auburn really competing in the top 4 of the league with Peyton Thorne? Like a playoff potential race, which I think should be expectations for Auburn is a playoff appearance. With Peyton Thorne, I don't see that. I think there's not saying he can't improve, but again, I think there's a ceiling on his play. He can be the greatest from talking. They love him. Great kid. Check the box. Great preparer. Check the box. First guy in, last one to leave. Check the box. All that stuff, the intangible stuff you need out of that quarterback position, which is the most important position in all of sports. But I think there's a physical limit there. And I think their schedule is very doable. But again, I think with Peyton Thorne, you leave yourself to only winning a season, I think 8-9 games. Like I just don't see him winning double-digit games and getting Auburn to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that they said, for me and listening to people around Auburn, I feel like they're riding with Peyton Thorne because they didn't get their quarterback in the portal. right? They're trying to push him up and get him confidence. I'm not buying that. Maybe I'm wrong here. I think they're going to be better at running the football. They get some young, really good talent at wide receiver, maybe, but those guys are still freshmen. How do they go through a 12-game season? I think it's a big deal here. One final football question for you here. We've brought them up a couple of times. Florida. Dave, on Thursday, I talked about if there's any program. So I did my tier groups, and I had them in tier 4, my bottom tier of the SEC. Okay. They are the only team, because Mississippi State, Vandy can't do it. They're the only team that's in the bottom of the barrel of the SEC right now, football-wise, that can be in tier 1, right? Like the right coach gets in there with the way that they will spend money. I think that Florida, if the right coach gets in there, it's a sleeping giant a place. Like they can win a lot of there. But Dave, I gotta admit, I don't think Billy Napier makes it halfway through the year. I think Ron Roberts takes over an interim, and then they're just gonna go from there. I gotta be real with you. I think they're in serious trouble, and Billy's in serious trouble.
No, I agree. Now we just talked about Texas, and I think Auburn's schedule's not being that difficult. I think we're on the other end of the spectrum here with Florida, just like you've seen everybody.
Toughest schedule in the country without question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said middle of the year. I'm with you. If you lose to Miami, let's say you lose to A&M, let's just say you beat Mississippi State and Starkville. So you're sitting there at what? 2-2. You head into that bye week and you lose to UCF at home, and that would be your back-to-back times. You've lost to UCF twice in the last 3 years at home. And then you go to Knoxville the next week. You're right. He may get fired there. And I know a lot of people like to do it during those bye weeks. Well, they get at Tennessee, and they get Kentucky back at home. Then they have a bye week before Georgia. You lose to UCF, who those Florida fans think they're a lot better, and as they should. They are, as a program, better than UCF. That'd be back-to-back losses. And then Tennessee's going to be looking for some blood, looking for some revenge when you come to Knoxville after playing one of their worst games of the season last year at the Swamp early in the year. You lose that UCF game, I think – well, I'll say this. I think if you lose to Miami and it's bad, that gets the snowball. I think that gets it rolling. You beat Sanford. Again, you 0-1 in the SEC. That gets it. Like I said, Mississippi State. But I think the thing it might hammer it home, the nail in the coffin, would be the UCF loss at home. I think would kill him. But overall, I mean, I think Graham Mertz could be solid. He's played a lot of football. But again, they're banking on a lot of young kids again. It's just over and over. It's like they can't keep a roster together for them to, hey, you know what? He's returning for his second, third year starting in the league. It's always their refreshing. It's like, oh, first time. He's got all the talent in the world, but he's playing. I mean, I like Eugene Wilson. I like Trey Wilson and them. But again, I just don't see anybody. It's a real difference maker out there that's going to be like, oh, yeah, Florida's going to go win 7-8 games this year. I'm with you. I think it's, after reading that article today, donors, people who give money to the university are stopping giving money. That's the first sign. I mean, is anyone ever really came back from that? Like, yeah, well, this guy was on the hot seat. You know what? He really had a 10-win season, turned the whole thing around, and you know what? He retired at Florida. I think it's already been set in motion. And again, you add on top, the cherry on top, the schedule is very difficult. I just see no way. I'm with you, Blake. No way he survives this 2020.
The only person would be Eli and what he did last year. Because Eli, was on the hot seat, but that's a completely different situation. I mean, Eli never really had this type of drama around it. Okay, Dave, one last question for you. I've kept you a little bit longer than I anticipated. Who's the best basketball team in the SEC right now?
So I did a power rankings yesterday, and I got a lot of flack from South Carolina fans. But so I had Tennessee 1, and I was basing it just off my own criteria here on a neutral floor if we were playing a series, whether you name best of 5, best of 7. I would take Tennessee. I think Tennessee would last in a series longer than anyone. Then I went Auburn, Alabama, and South Carolina in my top 4. Yep, South Carolina at 4. Hell, they win tomorrow, though. Obviously, you move up if you go win at Neville Arena in Auburn. But right. I think Tennessee overall, they have some question marks. Got blown out at Reed Arena the other night in College Station. I will say this as well. I think A&M uncharacteristically shot well. They don't. I mean, A&M's usually sitting there like 25%, 22% from field if Wade Taylor and Boots Radford aren't shooting well. Well, they were like 7 for 10 at one point in the first half.
Right.
I think that was the exception. So I think Tennessee kind of ran into the bus. As you know, Blake, you follow the SEC 1 through 10 on the road this year. I'm even including your team, LSU. Going to the PMAC this year, LSU plays a lot better. Now, granted, I mean, they were up on Alabama with 9 minutes left the other day in the second half.
And just fell apart, didn't have the depth.
Yeah. Yeah, they beat Ole Miss at home. I think outside of LSU, after LSU, I mean, usually Bud Walton Arena is a tough place to play. Memorial, I guess, traditionally, and then you got Missouri's not very good. But I think everybody else, 1 through 11, is a tough road game in the league. You could lose on a given night. But going back to your original question, I think Tennessee's the team I trust the most. If I was betting true money, if I had a line on the line where it's like, hey, who wins a 5-game series, 7-game series in the SEC? Hell, I had a bunch of Alabama fans for being like, you think Auburn would beat us in a series? Like, yeah, they got a massive front court advantage against Alabama. Hell, if Bruce didn't go brain dead and sit Johni Broome for 7 or 8 minutes when they played the first time in Tuscaloosa, Johni Broome could have had 50 there. He just set him on the bench when he had 3 fouls for 7 or 8 minutes. That killed me from there. But I think the best 2 teams that I would trust that travels on a game-to-game basis, I think Tennessee, then I'd probably say Auburn.
I tend to agree with you. I'm excited for South Carolina fans because, you know, they've had so much negativity surrounding their program. Let me ask you this, though, kind of sidebar. This Arkansas stuff is crazy. You don't have to comment on it, but I mean, it's nuts. I mean,
it's kind of where there's smoke, there's fire. It's almost like that's too crazy or outrageous of a rumor for there not to be not going to say it's true, but something to be there.
Gotta be. I mean, I thought Arkansas would be really good this year. And
Trevor Brazil's still not back with the team. Yeah.
He's still not back. And I'm like, dude, I kind of just want to like Arkansas fans need a win. They need this baseball season more than anybody. So I feel bad for the Razorback fans, but
shoot, I think Muss will be going. I mean, if you made me guess right now, I think Muss is going at the end of the year.
Really?
I think he'll be going. I think he'll be going. I think if UCLA opened up, I think he would walk.
I agree with that.
He West Coast guy. Apparently, he's on the rocks with some of the bigger donors at Arkansas. I think he's asking for money, and they're like, "Well, shoot, dude, we just gave you a lot of money, and you missed on a lot of the kids in the portal. Like, what do you mean? What's going on?" So I think he may take his ball and go to the West Coast.
Wouldn't surprise me. Would be a little shocking. I wonder who would take that job. Who would?
Yeah, Chris Beard.
Amen.
They go after. I mean, I don't think Kentucky Mitch Barnhart would go hire Chris Beard just because I think he's more a little conservative after the whole domestic violence thing.
Right.
For Arkansas, I think Chris Beard would be just a total natural fit in there. For whatever reason, Ole Miss fans thinks he's going to hang around for multiple years, which I don't think he is.
Most ultimate Ole Miss take of all time. By the way, I got to admit, Florida opens up. There's only one person I'm calling, by the way.
He'll walk there too.
You know, look, when Billy gets fired, if Lane Kiffin goes to Gainesville, people are in trouble. Yeah, people are in trouble. So we'll see. All right. Dave, tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff, buddy.
All right, so we do a live show Monday and Thursday nights, 8 Eastern, 7 p.m. Central on the SEC Unfiltered platform. You can follow me at Mach 10 Sports. We also have our own YouTube page at Mach 10 Sports. I'll post the videos after the live show every time. But yeah, go give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, tell us how we can improve. And that's where you can find us, man. And Blake, I appreciate you letting me come on the show, man. It's always a blast. Enjoy the work you do.
Anytime, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, man.